Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics, Big Baby and Star Crasher at KingComics.CA. Check out my other videos on YouTube. King Comics 2021 is the channel. Check out my Instagram, MaximusRex13, and check me out on Facebook, MaxRex and or Big Baby. So today, guys, we're looking at Fantastic Four issue number 8. Let me open this guy up, show you the cover. So this is cover dated November 1961, and we're introduced to the Puppet Master, who's got a pretty interesting kind of design. So he's a man with very obvious lips, eyeliner, and also mascara, and wildly kind of, I would assume, drawn in eyebrows. So I'm kind of quizzical as to Kirby's inspiration for this design. I feel like it has to come from somewhere. It's so specific, but I don't know exactly where. So if anyone has an idea of something that might have been on TV, it's been talked a lot about how back in the 50s and 60s, 70s, all throughout, Kirby would take inspiration from stuff he saw on TV and science fiction shows and Twilight Zone and things like that. So I feel like this comes from somewhere pretty specific. I've seen a drawing of John Byrne real quick that I looked up the Puppet Master on the internet just to find out a bit more about the character. And John Byrne, to me, if you see that drawing, if you write Puppet Master John Byrne in Google Image, it really just looks like a bald woman. So there's definitely some sort of transvestite cross-dressing kind of aspect to the Puppet Master. And I don't know why exactly. Not being into puppets doesn't, automatically make you into that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's just an odd design. I like it. It's kind of odd and creepy for sure. But yeah, I just wonder what the choice was there for Kirby. Interesting here on the first page. I don't know if this is the inker's doing or Kirby's doing, but the 4 in the logo is kind of risen in 3D, maybe a sign of things to come in superhero movies, now in modern times, but I don't know if that's stuck. It's the first time I kind of noticed it, to be honest, so maybe it only happens here. We're getting kind of the beginnings of Kirby tech here, right? Still, I think firmly rooted in that 50s aesthetic and that 50s vibe. Early 1961 to me is a lot closer to the 50s, and then say 1969 is obviously closer to the 70s, right? And what I mean by that is just culturally and in the vibe of things. 1969 is almost the 70s, and 1961 is almost the 50s, right? So still a lot of 50s vibe here. Kirby's storytelling is still pretty standard, lots of panel per page, which isn't an issue. It's still pretty brisk reading. Some of the Stan Lee dialogue I'm not really into, to be honest. I don't know, having read Jack Kirby stories, knowing the history behind their collaboration, I'm not going to get into too much of that today, but a lot more of the work was done by Jack Kirby, and I would have been interested, obviously, to see his original dialogue on this. I can't see how people would claim it'd be any worse than what Stan Lee was doing. So this sequence is interesting. Here's what I mean about some of the dialogue. This is a good example. So we've got a character here. She's like, oh, the man on the bridge, that man, he'll be killed, right? And this guy's climbing the bridge, and he looks kind of, he's got kind of a weird, serene look. He doesn't look scared or anything or happy or really expressionless. So, you can assume maybe something's going on, and obviously it's the Puppet Master, as we'll find out on this next page, that's manipulating him. That in itself, it's funny when I get to there. But things like this where, the dialogue, I have to climb to the top, but I don't know why. Man, I know it's early stuff and for kids and whatever, but can you just be that obvious? Do you have to be that obvious is what I'm saying? Some interesting sequences early on with Mr. Fantastic right here. I thought this was interesting. So Sue kind of signals him, and he uses his stretcho powers, and just one of those funny Kirby panels with the extreme foreshortening and the fingers actually out of the frame, which kind of works. It's something, it's kind of this rule that you don't want to break that I've heard about, but if you do break it, Kirby just does it in interesting ways where he cuts off the fingers here, but the fact that he does it just makes the movement of this even more extreme in a way, and push us to the right even more in the reading sense, in the reading direction. And then just a little bit of his arm here kind of wiggling, and can't make it. It's up to you, Torch. So he's literally 6-7 meters away, and just can't stretch it no more. So they actually send the Human Torch to get him. And yeah, the bit of dialogue here. Now, this is the moment for you to leap to the water below. So he wants this guy to jump into the water. I mean, got to assume he's trying to get him killed or something, right? Go, my helpless puppet, jump. Just as your real life prototype will also jump at the same instant. A nameless nobody will be my first test of power. So again, the Stan Lee dialogue. Why would the puppet master just pick a nameless guy to jump off this bridge? And if he's nameless and he's a nobody that he doesn't even know, how would he be able to create a puppet in his like effigy? He just picked a random guy, doesn't even know his name. It's a little odd, storytelling wise, but hey, it's early, Marvel stuff. Doesn't make too much sense overall. Starting to get the Kirby hands, right? Starting to get, cragglier and almost, slowly but surely the fingers will morph into, the big square Kirby fingers we get used to in the late 60s and early 70s. What's fun about these early issues of the Fantastic Four is, again, it's seeing that evolution in the characters, in the subject matter, the sci-fi aspects. Kirby's art, obviously, he's going to be inked by other people all throughout the series, but, in the kind of the second, issues when Galactus kind of shows up, and after that is when he kind of really hits a stride and starts pushing out crazy concepts, and the art starts to change pretty drastically into kind of what I prefer and call peak Kirby, which is 70s, maybe I guess the whole 70s, the whole decade. I'm really into his stuff when he moved from Marvel to DC in the early 70s, first half of the 70s, and then his stuff when he's at Marvel when he goes back in the late 70s. That to me is the best stuff, but it's nice here seeing his evolution from more of a typical comic book artist, pretty run-of-the-mill, somewhat house style, if we could describe it like that back then, into the King Kirby that we all know and love, right? Yeah, just again, such an odd design for this Puppet Master guy. And sometimes he draws like, I get it, it's so he looks like a puppet himself, you know what I mean? He draws the kind of, I guess, folds that he would have on his face down the left and right hand side, but that kind of make him look like a, well, not like a puppet necessarily, but like a ventriloquist dummy. I like him here, you know what I mean? Like here, there's something about the way he's drawn here in the shadow on his face that makes him a little more menacing than when you can see his eyebrows and his eyelashes. Again, just an interesting choice. Here's another panel where maybe he looks like a bald woman, right? And he's wearing the suit because apparently like the stuff is radioactive, like a lot of stuff in the 50s, right? And then in the 60s they really started to realize, and it became more public common knowledge that nuclear and radiation wasn't the best kind of stuff, and it's probably more responsible for creating cancers and stuff than superpowers or creating atomic nuclear puppets, I guess, is what's going on here with the Puppet Master. So Alicia is his daughter, Alicia Masters. So there's this whole thing. I was checking out Tom Brevoort's blog online, and they were talking about, was she originally intended to be blind in this first issue? And from what he was saying, and I kind of agree with him, the fact that she's always got her hands up and stuff, and this here, I think this panel, if it hasn't been modified with the eyes or anything, but where she's kind of grabbing the thing's face, and she says, this man, his face feels strong and powerful, and yet I can sense a gentleness to him. There's something tragic, something sensitive, and she's not looking at what she's touching, which is generally what we do as people who can see. So the fact that she's kind of looking off in the distance maybe indicates, at least visually, that she's blind. Whether or not it's stated, I'm not quite sure. And gotta say, you get a lot of bang for your buck when you're buying comics back in the early 60s, because this is not just I think comics nowadays, mainstream comics, are standard at like 20 pages. When I was a young kid, they were about 22 pages generally, and it seems for this period, at least in the early 60s, they are 24 pages. So again, 2 extra pages from what I'm used to when I was collecting comics pretty feverishly, or mainstream comics. Yeah, so a lot more bang for your buck. Kirby, this whole way of plotting the story in chapters, I mean, he's been doing this from the very beginning. He's doing the raised 4 again on Johnny here, and this to me is, forget the aesthetic on top, of the composition, and even some of the lines that he's using and stuff is a sign of things to come with Kirby action and foreshortening. So it definitely seems to be working some of that out here early on. I think a good example of it. This is kind of a sample of things to come later. because he's still kind of caught in a very kind of classically illustrative kind of vibe, I guess is how I'd put it. And then there's little pangs of, again, things to come. I mean, with what we know of Kirby tech now and how he developed it later on with Fantastic Four in the 70s, this stuff looks pretty tame, but it's the beginnings of what he then will kind of twist and mold in his own kind of vision and style, right? So again, you are seeing the beginnings. He is inventing some stuff here, right? He knows about machinery and he's kind of guessing at stuff and inventing it on the spot. And prehistoric Kirby tech, I guess, is where we're at right now. Like I said, he's more illustrative, more kind of in line with classic pen and ink illustration. Steve Rude's got a lot of vignettes I've been catching, either, I'm not sure if it's Instagram or Facebook, but he talks about, he shows this image that Kirby did when he was 14, where it's just very classically drawn, and he's like, Kirby could do that. And of course he could. You can see and hear, like, a lot of this is just basic, classic inspiration, classic composition. But again, you're seeing pangs of things here and there where he's going to push it, and where we're going to start to see the crazy foreshortening and the psychedelic backgrounds and stuff, even though Kirby himself, I know for sure, was not into psychedelics. But, there's a vibe there in the mid-60s that he and Steve Ditko kind of hit as both psychedelic using gentlemen that really clicks with the psychedelic crowd around that time. I mean, the action sequences are always great. They're always easy, the Kirby storytelling, always easy to read. The horizon line tilts, like in this panel he's using, you're starting to see the way he's going to be depicting cities. It's still fairly realistic here, but he is inventing some stuff, and it is a little bit more heightened already. It'll get more so, obviously. Just really like this panel here. Also, this reminds me, maybe, again, if Kirby's taking inspiration from TV, maybe TV's taking inspiration from Kirby comics. The Birdman cartoon from the 60s, he faces off against a guy who's on a flying mechanical horse. So, not that a flying horse is a novel idea. It was in She-Ra when I was a kid. I guess that's kind of an archetype, so that's what I'll chalk it up to. So it's nice to see it here. And also in Birdman, if anyone out there knows that cartoon from the 60s, which I feel takes a lot of inspiration from some Kirby kind of vibes. The secondary show on Birdman, Galaxy Trio, I always thought took a lot of inspiration from the Fantastic Four. It's a fun cartoon. All right, so the beginnings of, he's not quite doing a full splash, but he's getting there, So there is early on the almost full splash page, in the Kirby lexicon. This image here, when I see, it's a good example of this. All throughout his career, Kirby's going to have these scenes where, things are very chaotic and you've got lots of people around and moving and people at different angles and falling and tripping over themselves. And the way he draws it is so specific that, I've always felt, and I'm sure I'm not the first guy to kind of notice this and say it, but that, having been in war and seen these kind of scenes and explosions happening and bodies flying around, there's this video on YouTube you can check out that's, Jack Kirby talking about World War II, I guess, if you want to search it up, and it's pretty riveting and also horrific as he describes it. So he's seen this kind of stuff, right? So I feel like his experience at war in World War II inform his visual language when he's doing these kind of scenes of destruction and chaos and people, again, flipping and falling and tripping over themselves. Masses of people fighting and clobbering each other. In the comics, at least. In real life, they were shooting at each other, right? Some more funny uses of Mr. Fantastic's powers here. So they do shoot him. He just kind of shoots all the bullets back right at him, as a rubber band would. A very solid rubber band. And of course, he doesn't have any fatal hits there. And I don't have much to say. Like, again, I'm not that interested in the storylines. With these early issues, it still feels kind of like a science fiction series from the mid to late 50s. And, the more interesting cosmic aspects haven't really started yet. They have gotten off of Earth for a little bit there in some earlier issues, but we're back to kind of just, pretty typical fare for most entertainment back in the day, the type of characters and the type of storylines. You know, you'll find similar stuff in Star Trek a few years later. Yeah, I feel that at that point too, when Star Trek is on, Kirby is taking a lot of inspiration from that series as well, and that'll show up in later issues of Fantastic Four when we get there. So there you go. That is it for Fantastic Four number 8, guys. That is my review for today. So thank you so much, everyone out there who's subscribed and is still watching. I really appreciate it. Thank you for still being there. If you are watching but are not subscribed, please do so below. Then it takes a quick second, helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comics just like we are. Thank you guys for watching once again, and have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.